This is a TV6 and Fox UP special report, A Sailor's Life.
Welcome aboard the USS Harry S. Truman. I'm Andrew Lacombe. We are sailing in the Atlantic Ocean off the east coast of the United States. The U.S. Navy invited our TV6 crew on board the Truman so we could find out what the life of a Navy sailor is like. Our journey started back in Norfolk, Virginia at a naval station.
Come on, we gotta get in regulations here.
With my sleeves buttoned, a belt around my waist, and a name patch on, I'm set to get a week-long taste of a sailor's life.
Welcome aboard.
So this is our coverall, our FRV flame resistant or flame retardant coverall, and we use this aboard the ship and while underway. So if we're out to sea, we're out working, we're using this uniform.
Stacy Atkins-Ricks, a Navy mass communications specialist, second class from Detroit, gave me a rundown of the Navy's different uniforms.
Our boot camp instructors make sure that we know how to wear the uniform well right away. That's one of the first things we learn in the Navy.
We loaded up a sea bag full of other uniform essentials I need on a ship.
Norfolk Naval Base is actually the largest Navy base in the world. There's about 6,300 acres. There's roughly 100,000 men and women who work on this base every single day.
Norfolk, Virginia is where this experience began. We got to see the pier with a carrier in port and some smaller ships. The Navy bought this property immediately after the U.S. entered World War I.
It really is kind of the mecca for maritime operations coming off the East Coast and deploying into the Atlantic and around the world. So this is really the starting point for all carrier operations on the East Coast.
The Navy has a total of 11 aircraft carriers with home ports in Virginia, Washington State, California, and Japan. This is the USS Abraham Lincoln.
The Navy has a maritime mission. You know, we support the shipping lanes that are vital, you know, to commerce, to communications, to everything that goes on around the world.
World travel is a highlight for aircraft technician second class Richard Lindsay from the Battle Creek area.
I've been to Bahrain I think 11 times. I've been to Masira, I've been to Dubai, all that, and those are countries I think growing up in Michigan where nobody ever in the world would ever thought you would go there. Like me personally, I'd never even heard of these countries before. So when I talk to my friends back home, they're like, where's that even located? I was like, I didn't even know till I joined myself. So it's pretty neat to tell them that, and they think because I guess coming in from a small town like that, you don't really think of things outside the world. And then it's crazy that one day I just decided to sign a piece of paper and go to boot camp, and now 7 years later I've gone to all these countries.
To get to those places takes months on a ship with about 5,500 others.
But when you're on the ship, I would say life is actually really simple because there's a routine, 12 on, 12 off. You wake up, you get breakfast, you go to work, you go to lunch, and then you go to dinner, and all you do is flight schedule, maintain aircraft, and that's just the gist of it.
A routine that sounds simple and starts with wearing your name and the Navy uniform proudly. I eventually got to see a lot more of the routine when I traveled to the USS Truman, but before we got in the sky, we had to pass tests at the Navy's Aviation Survival Training Center. We were required to prove if a helicopter goes down, we are comfortable in and underwater to stay safe until help arrives. In a real aviation emergency, getting hoisted out of the water is the easy part. To get to this point takes training and thinking.
We see those who are more uncomfortable in the water, they get in, they start freaking out, and that's where the issues come in. That's where that lack of professional happens. So comfortability is everything.
Our training started with a swim across the pool, wearing a flight suit, life preserver, boots, and a helmet.
Somewhat what you wear if you're a passenger in an aircraft. Just make sure that you're proficient and comfortable swimming in all of that gear. And then we have you inflate a life preserver just to show that you can do that. In case you do go into the water, you will be able to float and hopefully make it so that way rescue crews can come and get you.
This training, which we just started, is required of all aviators in the Navy and Marine Corps. It's something they must go through every 4 years. Underwater, we learned how to get out of a helicopter that crashed, grabbing the correct handles in the correct sequence to open the window and get to the surface. Then we were buckled into a seat and spun underwater. Our trainers told us to keep one hand hanging onto the helicopter window so we would have a reference point to crawl out. But on my first try, getting unbuckled with one hand didn't seem possible, so I let go, and finding the window again was impossible because I didn't keep my reference point.
That is absolutely important, especially if you're in an aircraft that is either crashing very hard into the water, something along those lines. If you release before you have a reference point, you're going to be lost. You're not going to have any idea where you're going. So as long as you maintain control of something to say, hey, I need to go this way to save myself, as long as you have that, you can pull yourself to safety that way and you'll be good to go.
Our reward for passing the training? Flying around the Norfolk area in an MH-60 Sierra. This helicopter performs search and rescue and tactical missions.
Saving people from sinking boats to delivering cargo to different ships, as well as employing missiles, hellfires, unguided rockets, and inserting SEAL teams into combat.
Dangerous missions that require comfortability in water, so you're always prepared for the worst-case scenarios. Coming up, we are back in the sky, this time to an aircraft carrier. We spent 2 days on the USS Harry S. Truman in the Atlantic Ocean. I'll show you the journey there, and later we'll get a glimpse of life on a ship with 5,500 people.
You're watching a TV6 and Fox UP special report, A Sailor's Life. Once again, here's Andrew Lacombe.
This C-2 Greyhound is standing by in Norfolk, Virginia to take us to the Truman. There are pretty much no window seats, and you face the back of the plane. Our flight took about an hour and a half. I shut my eyes for a bit, but woke up as we started to descend. To land on an aircraft carrier, the plane's tailhook has to catch one of 4 steel cables. It usually hooks, but on our first try, it didn't, so we kept right on going, back up in the air. We eventually landed, coming to a stop in just more than 300 feet. Landing on a Navy aircraft carrier feels just like the end of a roller coaster ride. 1 second you're flying at more than 100 miles an hour, and then you come to a complete stop. There's very little time to get out the back and off the flight deck so the next plane can land. We were escorted off the plane and down below the flight deck to meet the ship's commanding officer.
An aircraft carrier is many things. It's a large city at sea. It's a manifestation of American combat power, but ultimately it's a symbol of the American ideal.
Named after the 33rd President of the United States, the Truman is the Navy's 9th nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, and it's full of people.
Just about 5,500 men and women from Truman, from Carrier Strike Group 8, from Carrier Air Wing 1, and from Cruiser Destroyer Squadron 2-8 are at sea working 24 hours a day.
The flight deck is 1,100 feet long and up to 250 feet wide. From waterline to mast, the Truman is 20 stories tall. It can travel at speeds greater than 30 knots, and the air wing can take down enemy aircraft, ships, submarines, and land targets.
So the crew itself is 3,000 people. There's 5,500 on board right now, and about 40% of them are in their late teens or early 20. They come from all walks of life, all 50 states.
When I was on board, the ship's command master chief was from the Ann Arbor area.
We can sustain for long periods of time and still lean on each other during those long periods. So in order for 5,500 sailors, to come together as a family, maybe similar to what you're experiencing in Marquette, we come together like a family and to create that sense of brotherhood and sisterhood.
Sailors working on the flight deck wear colored shirts and helmets based on their responsibilities. Green shirts are hook runners. They reset the steel cables after each landing. On the opposite side of the flight deck are the catapults. 4 steam-powered catapults can take aircraft from 0 to 165 miles per hour in just 2 seconds. The flight deck is used for different amounts of time every day. There are some quieter moments, like right now when there's maintenance underway. Everything is watched closely by the island. That's where we find Brian Williamson of St. Louis, Michigan on watch.
Take pictures of foreign vessels of interest.
Williamson described what it was like to see a working aircraft carrier for the first time.
How vast it was, like how large and how many people were on board, how they could do, like they could feed so many people, or how they can have so many racks for all the people on board, and the F-18s landing on board. That's pretty interesting and amazing for a first timer when you get on board.
When we were on the Truman, the crew was getting recertifications
to rehone our combat skills and ensure we're ready to deploy wherever and whenever required.
The training doesn't stop when the sun goes down. Planes continue to land and take off after dark, an around-the-clock operation on this symbol of American freedom. Still to come, we'll take a closer look at a sailor's life on the ship, the jobs they have, how they stay in shape, and how they start each day. Then later, what the future holds for the U.S. Navy.
You're watching a TV6 and Fox UP special report, A Sailor's Life. Once again, here's Andrew Lacombe.
A regular day on a U.S. Navy aircraft carrier starts before sunrise. After breakfast, there's still some time to clean up and get to a meeting before the workday begins. As you can probably imagine, when you're out to sea, each day is pretty routine. From top to bottom on the USS Harry S. Truman, 5,500 crew members are assigned to different jobs.
Take pictures of foreign vessels of interest.
Above the flight deck, Brian Williamson of St. Louis, Michigan is on watch.
I provide indication and warnings for warfare commanders of the strike group of any threats.
Down below, Tyler Monfett and Lorenzo Bonner work as personnel specialists, processing paperwork for their fellow sailors.
It hits home for a lot of people, because if you're talking about someone's pay or their entitlements for their wife and their kids and all that affects the sailor on a day-to-day basis.
After breakfast, every day follows a routine.
Getting ready, morning hygiene, come into work, and then we did quarters, sailor's creed, go through plan of the day.
Sailors get some downtime each day on the ship. They are required to work out 3 times a week, so you'll find exercise equipment pretty much anywhere there's extra room on board.
My typical workday is a 12-hour watch. I typically get 12 hours off, and I usually sleep around 8 hours, and we work out on a daily basis.
The Seaside Gym is a relaxing place for Bonner, who is from the Detroit area.
Just mostly the water is what I'm looking at. I kind of put myself into a calm place, given that we are gone. I like to kind of channel my energy to de-stress, detox.
The father of 3 joined the Navy 3 years ago.
I got to a point where it was just like I wanted to make a drastic change, and saw a commercial, and I said, what's more drastic than joining the service? So here I am.
Monfett, who is from Lower Michigan's Thumb region, says he enlisted to get away from home.
I had been there, my whole life, so I want to see a little bit more of the world, and I've absolutely done that, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. Last deployment, we stopped in Greece, France, England, and Portugal.
On the ship, there are limited chances to connect with people back home.
I think people would be surprised to know that we're just normal people like them, but we're just cut off a little bit more, but we're doing the same things as them, talking, socializing, eating, working out. But we miss a lot, we think a lot about home, and the best part of our time here is when we get to go home on leave and see everybody.
So when I was younger, first out of the house, it was it was a culture shock. I was like, I'm calling home a lot more than I do now, and I missed home a lot more. But as soon as 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 more time elapsed, it was just become easier. Now it's just like my parents understand, my friends understand. I go home, they come see me. Like, it's just been pretty easy to adjust.
Typical questions that I get is basically like, just what do you do? Because most people they think it's like what you see on the movies, which it is, you know, but not all the way. So I think people are just more so they already have a kind of a picture in their mind of what it is, but when they do ask, it's just simple questions. Just what you do, how is it like, where do you guys go, type of ordeal.
No matter the job they have on board, these sailors are making sacrifices, protecting the seas around the world. As we navigated the narrow hallways and staircases on board the Truman, we saw sailors in essential roles from top to bottom. But the most action for sure is on the flight deck.
We've gone up there just to see the stars, or we've seen the Aurora Borealis on deployment, which was amazing. So we go up there to see, take in new sights, you know, lock in stories to tell for people when we get back home.
When we come back, a look to the future of the U.S. Navy.
You're watching a TV6 and Fox UP special report, A Sailor's Life. Once again, here's Andrew Lacombe.
The traditions and power of the United States Navy are visible around the world every day. While I was on board the USS Harry S. Truman, I could feel a huge sense of pride for the 244 years of Navy history. But as the world evolves, Navy leaders say this branch of the military is too. Here's how a sailor's life is changing. On the USS Truman, I was surprised to see that the crew steering the ship is using pretty basic technology. You go back a few decades and this scene would probably be quite similar. The ship's commanding officer faces the tall order of living up to the highest standards.
The Navy is very traditional, and it's a wonderful thing, and our traditions go back hundreds of years. The world is evolving. The Navy is evolving with it.
That means making sure industrial age practices don't hold the Navy back.
The speed of information is vital in combat operations. You can imagine the challenges at sea in order to integrate all those capabilities, and our primary focus right now in the Navy at the high end of tactical capability is to ensure that our informational capabilities are up to the task.
The Navy is also moving into the next generation of combat aircraft with the Lockheed Martin F-35.
Systems within the aircraft that are going to make it much safer for pilots at night in bad weather to come aboard the ship, and that's when you're really earning your flight pay.
The first thing I'm going to have you do is put your left hand over on the throttle.
At the Norfolk Naval Base, I had the chance to fly in an F-35 simulator. Lockheed Martin takes this to Navy and Air Force bases to let pilots try the Joint Strike Fighter out.
And we try to show them the difference in fourth generation aircraft, the F-16, F-15, F-18, and what the new fifth gen aircraft will do. Compared to a Hornet or F-16, there's not a lot of buttons and stuff. Everything you'll see is going to be on the touchscreen, the laser touchscreen.
America's most expensive weapons system has been one of the most challenged programs in the history of the Department of Defense.
There's been a number of issues. The tail hook originally wasn't working. That's been fixed, and no major issues right now.
In the meantime, the Navy's sailors are changing. The commanding officer of the USS Truman says over his 30 years of service, he started to see the Navy give women more significant roles.
When I graduated from the Naval Academy, women were restricted in certain combat roles, and today we have men and women serving side by side in the Navy, completely unrestricted.
While a new Pentagon policy effectively bans transgender people from joining the U.S. military and serving in their preferred gender, the commanding officer says everyone is working toward a common goal.
I can't think of a better line of work to be in when we can dispense with all the superficials and focus on the substance. And it's one of the things that's kept me in the Navy for as long as I've been in.
Steering the way through sometimes rough waters, the U.S. Navy says its 320,000 active members are ready for whatever challenges are ahead.
Well, at first, like I would say initially when I joined, I didn't really think much of it because I was, a kid at the time. But when I hear like people say thank you, for your service now, I kind of like, when I think about like other people in the service, I think about like the time that they take away from like their family and all the sacrifices that they do. It's like, that's why I think of it as now. It's like, hey, thank you. We do sacrifice quite a bit. I have 2 kids myself, and when you leave for 9 months and you come home, there's a lot that changes. Like I never thought of it in that perspective until it actually happens. And a lot of people don't do that. Even like, especially where I come from, hardly anybody leaves their hometown. So for somebody like that to just pick up and leave, I think that's the hardest part. Is just leave everybody behind and then go start your own career.
That wraps up our special look at the life of a U.S. Navy sailor. I want to thank you for joining us. I hope you learned something new about the life of the men and women serving our country at seas. I also want to thank the U.S. Navy for hosting us for truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience.